We are in the last weekend of this four-part series called Spiritual Portals. And now for a month, we have been studying together what it means to live at a higher plane of faith. How do we get to that next place that God's trying to take us? Like, we start here, God wants us here, and on our way from here to there, we have to pass through these openings that God places in front of us. And if we step through, then we're never the same again. If we pass through the portal, then we actually get to that new plane of existence. We get to start living the life that God created us to live. Now, I understand this is a message for Christians, and I also understand not everybody in this room, not everybody listening online is a Christian. You haven't decided yet to be a follower of Jesus, but I'm glad you're checking this out because you're going to come to understand, if you've been a part of this series, you are understanding what it means to follow Jesus, what it means to be a fully devoted follower of Jesus. And to become that, we step through these portals. Now, to start today, we're going to begin like we have every week in this series, and it's with a definition of spiritual portal. When I say that, I want everybody to have a good idea what a spiritual portal is. So if you have your note page in front of you, or it's going to be up here on the screen, we're going to read the definition of spiritual portals out loud and together. You ready to participate? Yes. All right, here we go. Let's read it together. A spiritual portal, a moment in time that defines the rest of your existence, an opportunity to step through a passageway from the life you know to another plane of life that God has prepared for you. It's a passing experience, open for a moment right in front of you, but then the opportunity is gone. Next part. Everything I know about these portals assures me that if you step through, you'll never be the same again. And the final part, a portal demands an intentional decision on your part. You'll never pass through one accidentally. The demands are just too high. And I've emphasized that last part every week. It's not going to be an accidental experience. It's going to be an intentional experience. God doesn't want you to say, oops, don't know how I started a relationship with Jesus. Oops, don't know when I started following Jesus. Oops, I don't know how this happened. That's not how one becomes a Christian. It's not how one lives their life for Christ. We do it with an intention of our will. You're either going to pass through a portal or you don't. You're either going to be on this side or that side. No half measures. How many of you, like maybe as a teenager, were ever shoved into a swimming pool with your clothes on? Let me see. How many of you ever just jumped into a pool with your clothes on? How many of you did it like last night? Yeah, if you've ever been in a pool with your clothes on, you know you're either all in or you're all out. And a portal requires you, guess what? To be all in or to be all out. In week 1, we learned about the spiritual portal of release. That's releasing anything that's holding you back from full devotion and complete obedience to Jesus. Most people don't live fully devoted to Jesus. Most people try to do it halfway. Like, if I can just live the parts of my life the way I want to, then I'll give Jesus some other parts. Or if I can have one hand holding on to things that I like, whether Jesus likes them or not, and hold on to the hand of Jesus, I am content staying in the middle. But Jesus doesn't allow us to stay in the middle. He says, you follow me or you don't follow me. You step through the portal or you don't step through the portal. The good news is we get to freely choose that. The bad news is we have to freely choose that. To live the life that Jesus created you to live requires releasing so that you can embrace. That was week 1. 2 weeks ago, we learned about the spiritual portal that opens right at the moment of your greatest pain. Like when your heart is crushed, when your life feels broken, and when as far as you can see into the future, you don't see help coming. You don't see rescue coming. You don't see relief or remedy for your problems coming. And you find yourself sitting in that place of disappointment. And the portal opens when we move from disappointment to devotion. And that's actually the goal of all portals. Look at this. The goal of a portal is full devotion. The goal of a portal is full devotion. Let's say it together. The goal of a portal is full devotion. Last weekend, we journeyed down the path a little further with portal number 3. We learned about the portal that opens at the moment of your sacrifice. When you are willing to take something you love and lay that down for the cause of Jesus. When you decide that you love Jesus more than you love anything else. It's sacrifice. Sacrifice is giving what we love for what we love most. That was last weekend. Today we're going to wrap the series by re-examining a couple of the Bible stories we've already looked at, and we're going to cover some new ground in this message today, and we're going to learn together the portal called relinquishment. Relinquishment. Let me define that. To relinquish is to voluntarily cease to keep. It is to give up, to give away, to hand over, to lay down, to let go of, and to surrender. I like that idea of surrender, raising the white flag. I don't get to be the boss anymore. Someone else is the boss. I surrender. Give you an example of this. There was a fully devoted follower of Jesus. He lived actually the kind of life for Christ that we all should imitate. Like, he would be a good role model for you if you're looking for one as a follower of Jesus. He lived relinquishing to Jesus everything. And he learned about the kind of life that exists on the other side of surrender. And here's what he wrote about it. It is no longer I who live. Now, what does it mean? I don't live anymore. What he's talking about is his ego, his will, his plans, his wishes, his ambition. My ego is not going to run my life anymore. My plans are not going to dictate my direction anymore. It's no longer me living for me is what he means. But Christ lives in me. Now, I'm living in this earthly body. I mean, he says that. I live in this earthly body. But I'm trusting in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. It's no longer about me. It's no longer about me. It's not about me. It's about Jesus. That's what he was saying. That's the level of life he had achieved. That's what he experienced when he stepped on the other side of this portal. It's not about me. It's about Jesus. Let me say it another way. When I relinquish, I'm all in. Can you say that? When I relinquish, I'm all in. That's relinquishment. That's laying down your life, and it's picking up the life that Jesus invites you to live. Now, what that looked like in the first century for the apostles of Jesus looks so different in many cases from the Christianity we see today. Like if we were to go back and look how followers of Jesus lived, how followers of Jesus relinquished back when they had actually seen him. And they'd been with him, and they saw him after the crucifixion and after the resurrection. Like they were so all in. And then we fast forward to, this millennia, and we see a cozy Christianity, like a convenient Christianity. Like, well, I kind of like it. I kind of think Jesus is cool. I'm kind of in. I'm sort of about it. I want to tell people about Jesus, but I really don't. I mean, that could be embarrassing. I'd like to invite others into this life with Christ, but I don't. I mean, I'm not sure Jesus needs to be first. I mean, I don't even think he needs to be first. I don't even know if he wants to be first. I mean, I'm not convinced about that. And I guess I could make him first in my life, but I'm kind of busy. That's not what life with Christ looked like for those who'd personally met Jesus, who had actually walked with Jesus, who'd listened to him teach, who watched the miracles that he performed and heard the authority with which he spoke. They were so certain that he was the Son of God, so certain that he was worth the full investment of their life, that many of them served him even if it cost them their life. The person who wrote the scripture we just read a minute ago about, I no longer live, but now Jesus lives in me, that guy's name was Paul. He was beheaded for following Jesus because he'd made a decision in his life, I'm all in. Simon Peter, many of you know about Simon Peter, or you've been to St. Peter's in Rome, or you've heard that name or term through history. Very famous follower of Jesus. He was crucified for following Jesus. Matter of fact, when they were getting ready to crucify him, he said, I don't deserve to die in the same way my Savior died. And so they crucified him upside down on a cross to mock him and to shame him in his death. But he was willing to do that because he'd made a decision in his life at some point, I'm all in. Andrew was a follower of Jesus. He was crucified. Thomas, doubting Thomas, but after he doubted, he really believed. He was impaled with swords until he died because he followed Jesus. Another disciple was clubbed to death. Another was burned to death, and on it goes. Those followers demonstrated what it means to relinquish, which is to voluntarily cease to keep. Voluntarily. It is to give up. It is to give away. It is to hand over. It is to lay down. It's to let go of. It's to surrender their very lives and every part of their lives. There are questions that let you know if you have passed through the portal of relinquishment or not. Let me give them to you. Am I living my life for me, or do I live my life daily for Jesus Christ? And then the other question, am I all in? Now, I know some of you, and I know that you want this. Like, this is the desire of your heart, has been for a long time. Like, I want to be all in. And others of you who I don't know as well, I'm sure you're at that place. Like, I want to be all in. I just don't really know how to get there. I don't know actually what that looks like. Like, I'd like to live for him. I'd like to be dead to myself and alive to Christ. I'd like to fully live the life he created me to be. But I don't know how. If your heart's desire is there, today I'm going to teach you the prayer of relinquishment. Like, how do you fully surrender your life to Jesus? You say, now, Brad, wait a minute, before we get too far down this road. If I do that, do I have to get weird? Like, do I have to become a pastor? Not that pastors are weird. I didn't mean to equate those. Do I have to move far away, be a missionary or something like that in my life? Well, I would say to you quite honestly, that might be the path Jesus has for you. But more likely, instead of moving you across the globe, Jesus might just want you to walk across the street and invite that family with 3 kids who never go to a church on Sunday to be a part of the life of Christ that you've experienced, and maybe have them come here with you. For those who are online, who live in faraway places, like maybe you invite some friends to brunch on Sunday at your house and let them watch online with you, and then have a meal together in your living room. I mean, if you say I'm all in, it might mean you need to leverage more of your finances for the work of Jesus than just continuing to use your money for your own pleasure on things that won't matter 5 years from now. I mean, I can't tell you how Jesus will tap your shoulder and whisper in your ear or knock on the door of your heart. I don't know what it's going to look like exactly, or what it's exactly going to cost you to be a follower of Jesus, but I absolutely know the purpose of your life is to go all in for Jesus. The reason you're occupying space on the planet, continuing to consume oxygen, is because the purpose of your life is to go all in for Jesus. I absolutely know that on the other side of this prayer is everything that God has planned for your future. 2 times in my life I have prayed this prayer. And each time God has opened up the next phase or the next stage or the next part of his plan and purpose for my life with Christ. This church was born the second time I prayed this prayer. I prayed it, and then God put on my heart, this is what I want you to do. I didn't know how it was going to be done. There was only a handful of people. There's no idea where we'd meet. We had no idea if anybody would show up. We didn't know if we would survive a year, much less 12 years. But this grand adventure has now touched thousands of lives and reached hundreds of adults who are now followers of Jesus, who were not followers of Jesus before. And it all came about after I stepped through the portal with this prayer. You're sitting in this room. You're watching online as a result of this prayer. And God's greatest work in your life and through your life is just waiting for you to pray this prayer. Now, there are 5 parts to this prayer, and we're going to learn all 5 of them, and then we're going to be done for today, all right? So, follow with me. Here's the first part. Dear Jesus, I'll do anything you want. Dear Jesus, I'll do anything you want. In week 1, we learned about the rich young ruler, and Jesus wanted him to relinquish the hold that money had on his life, but the rich young ruler couldn't do it. In other words, Jesus said, I need to see that you'd be willing to do anything I want, and here's one thing that I believe is going to be a problem for you, and let's just test that. And when Jesus tested that, the young man demonstrated, yep, that's a problem for me. Jesus, I can't do everything you want. Jesus said to him, sell what you have, give it to the poor, you'll have treasure in heaven, come and follow me. That's the portal. But the young man heard that. He was sad. He was very wealthy, and wealth had a hold on his life. He could not pray the first part of the prayer, Jesus, I'll do anything you want. Now, Jesus himself prayed the essence of the prayer of relinquishment the night before he was crucified. He was asked to die. He was asked to carry all the punishment for your sin upon his own back while he hung on the cross. But before he died that terrible death, he prayed, Father, not my will, but yours be done. Can I paraphrase that? Father, I'll do anything you want. This first part of the prayer is a big deal, and it has to be first, because if you hold back here, the rest of the prayer doesn't make sense. If you can't pray this first part, you're not able to pray the other 4 parts. You have to get to the place of being willing to say, Jesus, for the rest of my life, I'll crucify my will. I'll crucify my plans so that I can live fully for you. I'll do anything you want. Now, I'll tell you, I've been at this a long, long time, watching people who've prayed this prayer, who've come to this place in their life. I mean, from a young age, I've seen this. And there seems to be 2 main times in life when people are willing to pray this part of the prayer, I'll do anything you want. The first time, and the most likely time, is when somebody's young. You know why? Because every great revolution in the world has been fought by young people. You want to see the world changed? You light a fire under a young adult and you set them loose in a direction, and the world is changed. May I comment on the young women in Iran? Changing the world. More than bullets, more than bombs, more than economic sanctions. Young women who are passionate, changing the world. With the zeal of a young person, the passion of a young person, the radical, unstoppable fight of a young person, young people change the world. And I dream of a time when our church has dozens and dozens of young adults who are so on fire and so all in for Jesus that this whole community will catch fire because of their passion. The second time this prayer is often prayed, Jesus, I'll do anything for you, is by a broken older person. It's that person who tried it their way, who chased everything else the world had to offer. They pursued everything else that the world says matters. And in most cases, they actually achieved it and found out they were empty and still searching, and they finally surrendered and finally relinquished everything to Jesus and said, I'll do anything you want. That's some of your stories, older people. And the second time I prayed it, I was older. The prayer has to start here. Jesus, I'll do anything you want. Then it's, dear Jesus, I'll do anything you want, anytime you want. I mean, you've heard the expression, timing is everything. In the work of Jesus in this world, there is this now imperative that's built into it. Like when Jesus invites us into his life, the life that he wants us to live, the life he created us to live, he's like, I want you to follow me, and I want you to follow me now. There has always been an immediacy to the call of Christ on a life. He'd look at people and say, I'd like you to follow me. And right then, they would leave their jobs and their homes and the life they knew, and they would follow Jesus immediately. See, if we don't surrender our calendar to Jesus, we haven't begun to understand relinquishment. How many of you agree that time is one of the greatest gifts that God gives to us? Time is one of our greatest gifts. And so if we're willing to surrender, truly surrender one of our greatest gifts to Jesus, we're learning something about relinquishment. Now, a little bit of confession. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand, but I want you to think about this. Think of the next 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 weeks of your life. Think about the weekends. Don't raise your hand. I wonder how many of you already have them planned. Like your schedule's already full. Like you look at your calendar and it's like, I don't know what else I could add to it. And it's okay until I ask, was there any consideration before you put something else on your calendar? Does Jesus want this on my calendar? See, what we tend to do is spend our time the way we want to spend our time, and we haven't yet learned relinquishment. Can you imagine? Jesus, I'll get to you a week from Monday. What if you were in the military and a soldier told a commanding officer, I'm not available till next Thursday to obey that order? Yeah, some military people in here. Yeah, you wouldn't be a soldier very long, would you? When we relinquish, we come to Jesus and we say, I'll do anything. Anytime. And then, look at this next one, anywhere you want. Anywhere you want. This one seems to be a little out of the realm of possibility for some of you who are here or some of you who are watching online. I mean, you really can't imagine living anywhere else other than where you live right now. There's the son of one of our key leaders who some years ago prayed a prayer something like this. And today he lives primarily in a Muslim country teaching people what it means to be a follower of Jesus. 22 years ago, Jesus moved me from Kentucky to California as a result of praying this prayer. We've had people move to our church from other churches as a result of, Jesus, what do you want me to do? Where do you want me to do it? We've had people move from our church to other churches as a result of praying, Jesus, where do you want me to do what you want me to do? Like, it's the prayer of, where can I serve you best? Now, what we like to do is, Jesus, I'll serve you anywhere as long as it's a warm state, as long as it's a blue or red state, as long as it's the United States, anywhere, as long as it's near my grandbabies. Come on now. But the Jesus challenge is, who will matter more to you? Your children or me? Your grandchildren or me? Warm weather or me? Jesus must be first and highest. Jesus must be first and highest. Let's say it. Jesus must be first and highest. I'll serve you anywhere. We have an illustration of this. One of the famous people in the ancient Hebrew scriptures, before he was Abraham, he had a shorter name, Abram. And look at the story. God said to Abram, leave your native country, your relatives, your father's family, and go to the land I'll show you. And immediately, it's just like a couple verses later, Abram departed as the Lord instructed. And the land to which God promised Abram is the land of promise today. It's the land of Israel. All because, listen, all because Abram was willing to live relinquishment. To live relinquishment. I'll go anywhere you want me to go. Now, the next one's going to be a challenge for some of you, but if you're going to surrender, I can't leave this part out for your comfort. Dear Jesus, I'll do anything you want, anytime you want, anywhere you want, with anyone you want. There's an interesting nuance about the 12 apostles of Jesus, like that innermost group of early followers of Jesus. And if you grew up with some church background, you might know Jesus had his 12 apostles, the 12 innermost disciples. But what you might not know is that they were quite a mixed bag. One of the followers, as an example, was named Matthew, also went by the name Levi. I think it was because of the jeans he wore. I'm not sure about that. I'm making that up. Before following Jesus, Matthew, as a Jewish man, worked for the Roman government collecting taxes. Now remember the historical context. Rome was the ruling force in Jerusalem. Rome was the occupying army. The Jewish people were under the oppressive rule of Rome. They had lost a war to Rome. Their rights were stripped. Their traditions were stripped. Their laws were stripped. Rome was Big Daddy, Grandpoobah. The Roman emperor was their emperor. The Roman ruler was their ruler. And Matthew, a Jewish man, collected taxes for the enemy. So he'd come to your house and he'd take your money and he'd give it to Rome. People hated tax collectors because they supported the enemy. And Jesus invited Matthew to have his life transformed and said to him, "Follow me." And Matthew followed him. Now hang on to Matthew right here for a minute. At the same time in Jerusalem, there was a group of quiet assassins. They were called zealots. They often hid a dagger in the sash, like a wide strip of cloth around their waist, like a belt. And inside that fabric would be a dagger, so that when they were in the marketplace, when they were in the crowded streets of Jerusalem, they could take the dagger and bury it into the ribs of a Roman soldier. Zealots hated Romans, and they hated anyone who served the Romans, especially tax collectors like Matthew. One zealot was named Simon. He was creatively known in history as Simon the Zealot. And guess what? Jesus said, "Would you like your life to change?" And he invited Simon to follow him, and he did. And then Simon discovered that Matthew the tax collector was also a follower. And they were both in a small group of 12 people in the inner circle of the followers of Jesus. In any other setting, those two men would have fought fists and teeth, daggers and swords, but they laid down their political differences to serve their common Lord. If ever there was a word from the Lord for our day, it's this: churches have divided, and friendships have divided, and the cause of Christ has been harmed because followers of Jesus have put their politics above the work of God on earth and the mission of bringing the lost to Christ. We have one task, and that's to introduce people to Jesus and then help them follow him. And whoever is helping us in that mission is our partner. And when we surrender to Jesus, who we're going to choose to work with. We're saying, I am going to serve you, and if a zealot is serving you, I'll serve you next to a zealot. And if a tax collector is serving you, I'll serve you next to a tax collector. I'll serve you, Jesus, alongside anyone else who's also following you. And if you've allowed your politics to keep you from the main task of the church, the prayer of relinquishment can bring your heart back to the place Jesus has always wanted it, which is to just be focused on him and his mission. Dear Jesus, I'll do anything you want, anytime you want, anywhere you want, with anyone you want. See, he gets to choose who he invites to the party. He's the Lord, and I'm to follow him. So quiet, you'd think everybody had left the building. Dear Jesus, I'll do anything you want, anytime you want, anywhere you want, with anyone you want, at whatever cost. It's been so beautiful to me as a pastor through the years to see this played out in the lives of men and women who are completely sold out to Jesus Christ. I've been a part of churches. My dad was a pastor, and we'd have like building programs. You know, we needed a new sanctuary or a new children's building or something like that. And, you know, we were all small churches, all relatively middle class or so churches. There wasn't a lot of money there. But, I mean, I've seen people sell vacation homes or a second car or their recreational boat or whatever to give funds for the work of the church. I've seen people do this to support missionary families or to buy Bibles for children in other countries. I mean, they relinquish whatever the cost. You remember, to relinquish is to voluntarily cease to keep. It's to give up. It's to give away. It's to hand over. It's to lay down. It's to surrender. Now, I know we just talked about unity with people that we disagree with politically so that we can work together for Jesus. So what I'm going to say next might sound contradictory, but you might find that there are relationships that it costs you if you're following Jesus. Like, I can't party like I used to, and I could party. But when I fully decided to devote my life to Jesus, to continually be with friends who were pulling me back and pulling me under, like they didn't make sense anymore, I had to keep Jesus my first priority. Does that make sense? I mean, if you're dating someone who doesn't share your same devotion with Jesus, I mean, how can you easily live fully for Jesus, because a lot of your time is being spent with someone who isn't going to do that with you, and you may find that it costs you. But then go find someone who's spiritually compatible. See, when we say whatever the cost, we're acknowledging that following Jesus has a price. I mean, we're basically saying to him, Lord, how much of me do you want? I mean, do you want me to volunteer in a ministry at the church? Do I really need to commit to be present on the weekends so I can serve? Do I really have to give up an evening a week to be a part of a Bible study so that I can grow in my knowledge of the Scripture? Do you really want that much from me? A night of the week? I mean, do you want me to invest in your work? with a regular part of my paycheck? Is that what you want from me? I mean, I can't tell you what it's going to look like for you. But I bet some of you already know what it's going to cost, what it would look like for you if you were to relinquish, to be a fully devoted follower of Jesus, to say that you are going to live your life for Him and not for yourself any longer. I trust you and Jesus to work that out. But I do know He's waiting for your surrender. I do know He's waiting for your relinquishment. I do know He's waiting to hear from you, dear Jesus. I'll do anything you want, anytime you want, anywhere you want, with anyone you want, at whatever cost. I'm all in.